Everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH1002, and this is the lecture overview summary, video summary of the topics that we'll be covering in the 19th lecture, which is about, my hair's terrible, about report writing. So the idea is to go through what the kind of key issues are in how we think about structuring a report and what kind of issues we're looking for in terms of how it's used and what we want to get out of it. So a report, an academic report, is actually, think of it as a kind of very practical kind of way of distilling your experience into something that's useful. So if you like, work backwards, what would be your recommendations at the end that will help you or other people, if it's a shared report, to be able to improve the practices and the tasks that you undertake in, say, the next project. So it's like it's almost like you're kind of creating a to-do list, an advice list to say, do this and don't do that. So we look at reports and academic reports in terms of their practice as being something which is different from an essay. So you're not making an argument and extending a debate, but you are drawing on arguments and debates. But what you're looking for is something which you can offer as a kind of practical insight into the particular aspect and topic that you're working with. So we will go through kind of some of the processes that you need to be thinking about. Now, this is the first time around the block for this level of work, of report writing, and level of detail and level of academic insight. So the expectation is with this assignment is that with the coursework D assignment is that you are learning the terminology, learning the approach, and having a go at this. And that's really what we want you to do. We want you to have a go so that we can see how you think and what you think about and how you're able to organise your thinking. And a report does that very well. It's a very practical sense of how you can organise things that you've done, the reflections that you've done, things that you've read, evidence that you've gathered, and ideas that you generate, and you synthesize issues together to come out with something which is useful and practical. So that it's not just an abstract process for the sake of it. So what we'll do is we'll go through some of the kind of what I've called critical dispositions, and this comes from the it reiterates some of the point we made in the critical thinking lecture the other week, and it's really kind of a reminder to say kind of what is it our inquisitiveness is about. We need to have an open mind when looking at topics and subjects, so that we can discover what's out there. We're not relying on our assumptions. We're not making an automatic and assumed link that X plus Y equals Z. We're separating those issues, we're looking at them in their own terms, and we're asking the question, what evidence have we got for this? So what we'll be looking for, and this is spelled out in the marking criteria for the assignment, which is included with the brief, with the coursework D brief, which is on the DMU Commons wiki and is in the module handbook as well. We're looking for, if you make a statement or a claim about something, what supporting evidence have you got to enhance that claim? So it's not just hearsay, it's not just your opinion, it's not just common knowledge, if you like, but it's something which you found evidence of debate and discussion and engagement of these kinds of practices in other ways. So the critical disposition is about kind of having an open mind, but we also need to think through, there's a process that goes on here, an academic process that we need to learn to trust. And the academic process is something which is kind of, there's different ways of reasoning and different ways of thinking. We can think deductively, we can think inductively, and we can think abductively. Now, the difference between those is, Sherlock Holmes stands at the fireplace and says, there's a cigar butt in the fireplace that was smoked by a 6-foot-tall Welshman who just got off the train from Bristol. And it's kind of, well, how did he make that a deduction into that? Well, he uses a lot of, if you like, guesswork and supposition. So it's kind of like he assembles. But most of the time, the process is you would have to go and observe how many 6-foot-tall Welshmen get off the train from Bristol, and then observe how many people smoke cigars, and then how many of them end up in a particular type of property, and how many of them throw those cigars into a fireplace. So that's the inductive method, which is, if you like, the other way around. The abductive method is really kind of like when we daydream, and we walk across town one day and we don't know how did we arrive at the place that we've got at. We do things kind of automatically and with intuition. Each are valid and each are important, but we just need to understand how and why we're using them. So this is an introduction to some of those kind of thinking ideas and thinking techniques. So what goes into a report, and what we're looking for you to demonstrate in the report, is a kind of sense of fair-mindedness, a kind of, you're prudent about your own biases. We all have biases. We all observe the world from our own subjective point of view. But to what extent are we, if you like, using our subjective point of view to power through and bluster through an issue, rather than stepping back and saying, hang on a minute, there are other points of view that need to be considered in this, and how do we put them into a kind of balance? So the process of writing and thinking is a reflexive process. It's one where we ask ourselves the question as we go along, and at each stage you're asking the question, is this appropriate? Is this the kind of information that supports our argument? Is this the kind of information, the kind of presentation of evidence that makes a difference to the process that we're articulating? So it's kind of, we're dealing with some very complex issues, and we need to be diligent about how we go through these processes, and we need to think about, what I'll do is I'll go through the idea of what makes a good paper, an excellent paper, and an average mediocre paper, if you want, because I think it's really important that we get a sense of how and why we share this information. Are you marked individually on these things? What would be really interesting, we've not got this lined up to do, but if we shared them and learnt from each other in terms of what we produce with our reports, I think that would be a big change and shift in the way that we undertake our learning practices. But we're not there yet. We don't have the kind of institutional setup, I think, or personal expectation management to be able to do that. So what is, how does a report function? That's, I suppose, really what we want to get to the nitty gritty of. So, what is a report? We'll go through these issues. How do you write a report? Who is going to read a particular report? What's the kind of, I think a good question is, how do you read a report? How do you take things from a report that are useful for you? And we want to ask the question, what will our reader gain from reading our report? What will they be better informed about in terms of choices and alternatives and patterns of operation and behaviour and all the complex things that we're thinking about in terms of how we use information and knowledge and in a practical sense. So we'll look at this as well in terms of, we'll go through, this will be reinforced in the workshops after Easter in terms of the practical approach to doing this, in terms of formatting, style guides, and I'll show you some examples. Each week I produce the workshop and lecture notes, and I produce these in the basic report format, the kind of very minimalistic style of format that I will expect from you. That's the model that I'm looking for. So I can show you that. You can use it as a template. Doesn't matter if you copy the format, that's what it's there for. It's a standardized format. So making your report accessible to people through its simplicity is really important. I'll talk about some writing tips, and we'll look at kind of, if you like, some structure tips in terms of how you can include different types of evidence. And we've got a follow-on lecture which we'll do, I think, next week or the week after, which will look at academic evidence gathering, and I've ideas about what to include in that and how to make it relevant to the objectives that you're trying to focus on in terms of what the outcome is for the report. Okay, so the notes for this are up on the DMU Commons wiki. Just go to wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk, look for the TECH1002 section, and you can download them in the lecture notes section. If you've got any comments, if you want to share any experience, if you want to ask any questions, we've got the talk platform, which is at talk.our.dmu.ac.uk. Just log in with your student P number and your password through the LDAP button, and that'll take you into the topics. It'll be really good to have some shared experience about where we found reports to be useful and how we've benefited from using reports. But I'll see you at the lecture.